11:23 p.m. Friday night, 22 nights before my 25th anniversary. The doorbell ringing. That annoying ding, ding, ding. Normal during the day, but annoying when it wakes you up from your slumber close to midnight. I dozed off watching what turned out to be a terrible movie, with my wife away on an Uber. I had some free time, no more kids at home to worry about. I used to shorten my time by waiting for my wife to come home after a girls' night out. Waiting for her had become a habit of mine. I wanted her to feel uncomfortable sneaking home after the bachelorette party because things were not as they should be in our house. After a lifetime together, we were 3 weeks away from our 25th wedding anniversary and should have been looking forward to the occasion and had a big family celebration. But it didn't happen. My wife turned out to be a cheater. I had no intention of staying in her life when that momentous anniversary came. Just so far. She didn't know what I knew. We'd married young, had kids quickly, and were now living as a threesome, so there were no kids at home to worry about in the event of a breakup. The thing was, I wasn't going to divorce her. I was going to kill her. I found out 9 months ago that not only was she cheating with her longtime boss, but she had probably been for years. Her boss is my brother, Jake. My older, handsome brother, the family's favorite son, the guy who was 2 years older than me, the life and soul of any party, in whose shadow I had lived my entire life. I discovered their betrayal all those months ago when she accidentally left her phone open while leaving to get ready for a bachelorette party. I picked up my phone to give it to her and, quite accidentally, pressed a button, causing a WhatsApp message notification to pop up on the screen with the first words clearly visible. Why was she getting a message from my brother at home, since they had been together at work almost all day? More disturbingly, the message couldn't have been clearer. "Are you ready?" That's all the notification said. So, I opened her WhatsApp conversation with Jake and could see this message and many others. "Are you ready? See you at the usual place. I've booked room 245. Just come to the room. See you at 7:30. Wish I could stay the night, but I guess you'll have to go back to your little brother's place." The messages were very long and had all the evidence that these two pieces of pond scum had been cheating on me for months. What really pissed me off, besides the obvious betrayal, was the way they talked about how he could give me what I couldn't. My wife joined her brother in ridiculing and degrading me as a man, a lover, a husband. If my wife was aware of how my feelings for her had cooled over the past few months, she tried very hard to hide it. Of course, there were times when she would ask if I was all right when we spent quiet evenings without talking, without touching, without the tender gestures that are common between husband and wife. I always brushed it off, hoping it would at least worry her about the future. Apparently, it didn't bother her that our sex life had seriously diminished. Perhaps she didn't notice because their reports indicated that she was getting her needs met 3 to 4 times a week, between work and the bachelorette party every Friday. It must have been a relief for her not to have to pretend to enjoy sex with me anymore. If she didn't love me anymore, she could have ended our marriage and lived her life freely. But instead, she continued to get close to me as if I had no worth. I would have preferred a divorce, even though it would have been painful because I loved her completely, even before I saw that fateful text message. An exception to our sex life occurred when my brother and his family went to Florida for 2 weeks. During the first weekend, she started showing more affection towards me. She would hug me late at night and early in the morning. I unintentionally hurt her a couple of times during that period, but most of the time, she didn't understand my lack of interest. I would have liked to resist more, but not only did I need a release, I didn't want her to realize that by completely ignoring her. I knew about the affair, so why didn't I confront them? Simple. I was planning how to handle the situation. You might think I lacked the courage, but I wasn't one to give up easily. I hoped to avoid a worst-case scenario, but if it came to that, I'd rather live with it than endure the pain of betrayal from both my wife and brother. Over the months, I had time to think through many plans on how to address this. Of course, thoughts of wishing them both gone crossed my mind, but I knew there would be too many consequences. They usually only met for fun or family reasons. How could I resolve this without it being obvious? I thought about hiring someone to take care of the problem, but I didn't want to risk innocent lives. including my own. It was hard to remain calm around them, especially when we gathered as a family. They didn't try to hide anything, but for me, knowing the truth made their every action painful. I couldn't understand why they hated me. I had no idea. I had always been supportive, if not jealous, of my brother, and I had never given my wife a reason to disrespect me. I treated her well, both in and out of bed, and she had never been unsatisfied. I was at my breaking point, though. I devised a plan, though I knew it was a foolish one. I thought of exposing their affair and confronting them both, hoping to get some answers and maybe, in some way, find a sense of justice. However, deep down, I knew I would likely end up in prison, and that it could destroy my life and theirs. Ideally, I wanted a way to confront them and make them live in fear for a while, expecting a collapse of their marriages while I dealt with my own agony. I didn't know how to move forward, but I thought about confronting them before our 25th anniversary. Coincidentally, the anniversary fell on a Saturday, so I came up with a plan to confront them then. But as I was lost in these thoughts, I heard a knock at the door. Who could that be? I muttered to myself. She must have forgotten her keys. Coming, I yelled. When I opened the door, it wasn't my wife standing there. Instead, there were two officers. The older one introduced themselves as Officers O'Reilly and Bowski and asked if they could come in. I invited them in, sensing something was wrong. They looked solemn and O'Reilly spoke first. Sir, are you Mr. Richards, Irene Richards' husband? I nodded, waiting for what was to come. He continued, Mr. Richards, I'm sorry to inform you that your wife was involved in a fatal car accident this evening. Your brother, Jacob, was driving the car they were in, and he too was killed. Before I could process anything, I let out a laugh, not out of joy, but out of sheer disbelief at my fate. Not only had I been spared from the consequences I feared, but the insurance we had could provide some comfort in this tragedy. The life insurance policy was meant to pay off the mortgage if one spouse died, so the remaining spouse wouldn't have to sell the house. Of course, it was nearly paid off, so it wasn't much of a burden. But there was another policy for $500,000 for each of us. Not only would I avoid legal trouble, but I'd be in a much better financial position. The officers noticed my apparent calmness and asked if I needed anyone to be with me in this tragic time. No, officers, thank you for your concern, but life just did me a favor, I said. These two had been having an affair for 9 months. I had spent nearly every waking hour trying to figure out how to end it, and now it was over. It felt like natural justice. I'm fine, I said. What's more, I think I'll have a drink to celebrate. Would you care to join me? They declined, of course, since they were on duty, but I could tell they were judging me for being too calm in the face of such a tragedy. They left, asking me to contact the morgue the next morning to identify the bodies. I didn't tell them about the plans I'd made earlier, plans that no longer mattered. No point in complicating things. I played my role, the grieving husband, for the time being, knowing the insurance money would soon help me move forward. The house would be paid off and I'd be able to restart. That night, I slept peacefully, for the first time in months. The next morning, I went to the morgue to confirm that they hadn't miraculously revived overnight. As I stood there, examining the bodies, my sister-in-law was unable to bear the sight and asked me to identify Jake and Irene. The orderly warned me that it was a mess, but the tragedy had happened quickly, leaving no time for suffering. Turns out, the driver of the 18-wheeler had been overworked that day, fallen asleep at the wheel, and run a red light, causing the crash. It left the car in pieces and ended their lives in an instant. In a way, I felt some sense of relief. My struggles were over. The insurance would help me move on. I didn't feel the need to speak ill of them now. The cruel reality was that they were gone, and I was left with the consequences of their actions. It was a sad situation, but I knew I could finally breathe again.